So Nate, we're doing something a little different today. Instead of diving into a rookie mock draft, we're taking a look at Lance Zierlien's insane
Woo.
NFL mock draft. We'll say that to say the least. He also referenced it as being outlandish, so I appreciate that self-awareness that he had there. But we're going to dive into this, go pick by pick of the fantasy relevant players on the offensive side of the ball. Sorry, IDP players, I still love you, and I love IDP as well. But we're just going to be talking offense today, the offensive relevant players, like I said. So the first pick, Panthers are on the clock. They take Bryce Young. Nate, what do you think of this pick? How do you feel about this landing spot?
So, of all the quarterbacks in this draft class, Bryce Young is probably the most landing spot proof because he's the one that has shown us already that he can put an offense on his back and carry an offense even without great talent around him. He did it this year at Alabama. They did not have the wide receivers they usually have at Alabama this year. They were very disappointing. Jahmyr Gibbs was essentially their best receiver. And Bryce Young still put up great numbers and led that team to many wins. Of any quarterback to go to the Panthers, who unfortunately do not have a great wide receiver core right now, I think the best they got over there is Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and then whatever's left of Terrace Marshall and Laviska Shenault. So, I mean, it's not great, but it could be worse, honestly. Adam Thielen is not the worst wide receiver one, with DJ Chark for a rookie quarterback. It's going to take a little bit. I think we'd have to limit our expectations for rookie year. I like Bryce Young wherever he goes. The Panthers, I think, have a great coaching staff and a good timeline that they're working on right now. It's just year one production probably isn't exactly where you want it.
I think that's the best thing to put on it is that the year one production is not something to be expected, but they have done a great job building that coaching staff up with, a ton of offensive experience and things like that. So that team is, I think going to be on the right path. And I think for Bryce Young, that makes a lot of sense. I don't hate the spot. This is a spot I definitely see happening. We've been hearing a lot of talks between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud at the top, so I think this is very realistic at the end of the day as well. And I think, like you said, tempering expectations year one, maybe year two, maybe just early in his career in general might be the best play.
Quite honestly, I think we need to temper expectations for all these quarterbacks.
Definitely.
Because everyone got a little skewed after Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert had incredible rookie years. But we're talking about two incredibly rare, very talented quarterbacks. We can't just expect the best, the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks of every draft class to come out and look like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert the rookie years. That is insane expectations. Even Trevor Lawrence, who's one of the best prospects to come out in the past decade, struggled. You can blame it a lot on Urban Meyer, I'm sure, but these guys still take a year or two to transition into the NFL. All of the year one expectations with quarterbacks should be, realistic, where you're probably not going to get top 12 production out of rookie quarterbacks the rookie year.
I think that's an awesome point. And I think bringing up the point of, Trevor Lawrence, kind of the other side of that coin of where people kind of jump ship after the high expectations were not met versus just, maybe just chill out on the expectations to begin with, I think is a great process. Moving on to our next pick, another quarterback comes off the board. There's been a trade, Nate. Your Baltimore Ravens trade with the Indianapolis Colts. Lamar Jackson is a Colt. The Baltimore Ravens then draft his replacement in C.J. Stroud, who's somehow falling down the board to the 4th pick past the quarterback-needy Texans. But I digress. C.J. Stroud is a Baltimore Raven in this made-up fantasy world. What are your thoughts here with this pick?
Yeah, I sure have a lot of thoughts with this pick. But if as a Ravens fan, if we're losing Lamar, I want a quarterback back because the Ravens are not in a place to rebuild. They have a great team. They just need quarterback who's going to be healthy and willing to play for him. So if CJ Stroud's the guy, I love it. I think it's great for a Ravens fan. I think it's great for CJ Stroud. He's going to be able to develop in that system. He wouldn't be asked a ton of right away, and he would be able to do what he does so well and distribute the ball. He could kind of be that point guard playing out of the back and getting the ball to what hopefully is going to be a pretty good receiver core. I think we look down the board a little bit, we might see the Ravens picking up something to help CJ Stroud out.
Yeah,
and of course, I love Rashad Bateman. Hopefully, he comes back healthy and can hit the ground running.
Yeah, there's definitely no spoilers unless you've seen the mock already. Then they draft a wide receiver and who it is. But definitely, I like CJ Stroud in general. I think he's fairly also somewhat landing spot proof. I'm not too concerned about where his landing spot ends up being. I do like the Ravens a lot because I think, like you said, he gets into a system where they already have pieces around him. It's a better system, in terms of versus Bryce Young, where I think we can expect a little out of CJ Stroud year one. At least maybe not like anything crazy high end, but maybe more production where you could chuck him into a super flex, your quarterback 2 slot, your super flex slot in a super flex league. And I think you could, run with that and do just fine with it. But I like CJ Stroud. I like the fit. I would not be mad about this at all.
With CJ Stroud, how do you feel about this comp? Because with CJ Stroud, I think he's one of the most talented passers in the draft. Mm-hmm. He does have the playmaking ability. Will he use it? That is the big question mark. We saw it with Georgia, but we didn't see it much else in his career. Extremely accurate with the ball. I think CJ Stroud, Jared Goff.
Yep, I've seen that a lot. And I don't hate it.
It's not a bad comp. Jared Goff has been an incredible quarterback over the past couple of years for fantasy football. And if you put talent around him, he's able to distribute the ball and get the ball where you need it and get those great stats, get your team the win. CJ Stroud, I think, can do something very similar with the Ravens. If the draft was to play out with this, the Ravens offense would look pretty good. Dobbins coming back for, finally a healthy year, Mark Andrews. And then some hopefully wide receiver help.
And I think the one thing too that I think it's an awesome comp because I think, Jared Goff, while people are on two sides of the fence with the guy, at the end of the day, has always been solid.
Yeah.
He hasn't been this elite option by any stretch, but he's been a guy who, when he has pieces around him, he's a good piece to have. He's a piece worth having. So I don't hate the comp. I also think CJ Stroud has not tapped into the mobile side of his game.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily believe it's going to be something where he's, running 6, 7, 8 times a game or anything, but there can certainly be games where he takes off for 5 rushes just off a scramble and does something with it. And Jared Goff doesn't have that same capability. So I think Jared Goff is an awesome, safe, floor comp, but I think you end up getting more with CJ Stroud. But I think it's an awesome
as well.
End of day. I think it's a great comp. I think that's a good expectation comp too for where he ends up. As a, top 10 to 12 quarterback. I don't necessarily see him cracking the top 5 or 8 even of anything anytime soon. But at the end of the day, this would be a nice QB to have in that mix at the back of the top 12 list, in my opinion. So let's move on to the next one here. And we wait a little bit before we have another quarterback. And our next quarterback off the board, next offensive player off the board is at pick 7. The Houston Texans trade up with the Raiders to go grab Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. What are your thoughts on this pick? Will Levis going to the Texans? Interesting offensive pieces around him, quote unquote.
Yeah.
What are you thinking here?
I like this pick. I think the hate for Will Levis has gotten a little out of control. I think the upside that he brings, it's relatively similar to Anthony Richardson's upside, quite honest. And I think that while he's not quite as athletic, his accuracy is better than Anthony Richardson, who we'll be talking about in just a little bit. I think both these guys have a ton of potential, and they have a lot of question marks. And I think the Texans, a place where Levis is going to have to grow a little bit. He's going to be asked to do a little bit right away, and that might make it might have that Josh Allen, Daniel Jones kind of career where it takes 2 or 3 years for him to hit it off because that team is kind of devoid for talent. They have some pieces around there, but I don't think this is you walk in day one and boom, you're there. You're a top 12 quarterback. I think Will Levis has the potential to make that. But with this offense, it's going to take 2-3 years for him to come around and to have people be confident in his ability as a quarterback. That's just kind of the career arc I would see if he ended up with the Texans. I think the potential is there. I would still target him in the first round of my rookie drafts because any starting quarterback is viable, especially with one who's on a rookie contract in the first round. I would definitely have lower expectations for the first 2 years of his career.
I don't have a whole heck of a lot to add there. I think everything you touched on was right on. And I think, unless they happen to add assets in the second or third round, another receiver or tight end or somebody to throw the ball to, this team just doesn't have a lot on it right now. And that's just the fact of the matter is after the Deshaun Watson trade, it's been pretty much a rebuild. They have Dameon Pierce. They have John Mechie. They have Nico Collins. Not a great team for assets wise, unless Mechie ends up being, insane, which is possible. I liked Mechie a lot, but
feels like a bunch of wide receiver 2s, 3s, maybe wide receiver 2s on the team. Not really that wide receiver 1, but hey, they just grab Marvin Harrison Jr. next year.
True. That would be, there you go. Get your quarterback 1 this year, wide receiver 1 next year, possibly. So moving on, we're done with quarterbacks for a minute. So the Tennessee Titans grab my wide receiver 1 in Jackson Smith and Jigba. Nate, I want to know how you feel about this landing spot with the Titans. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. That quarterback position is scary, and that offense is maybe a little scarier. What are you thinking with this pick?
I truly think this is one of the worst landing spots for JSN in the whole draft. Number one, because I do like Burks, and while I think JSN is extremely talented himself and arguably more talented than Burks, they would just eat into each other's target share, because there's not a lot of targets to go around. That's the problem. Yep. If this was a high passing offense, Burks and JSN together, love it. But with the quarterback, lots of quarterback questions on this team and a very run heavy approach, there's really not enough targets to go around to make both these guys, top wide receivers. And I'm not sure that there's a talent gap between the two to really let one jump into that, top 15 production, because I think they're both kind of cannibalize each other. And if this was to be what actually happened, I would see JSN and Treylon Burks as production-wise wide receiver 3s as like my expectation, with upside on a week-to-week basis. Unfortunately. And I think, that's just immediate production. JSN, obviously, not my wide receiver 30 if he goes to the Titans, but
yeah, no, I hear you. I think, for this to work out, productively for fantasy, the Titans would have to have a philosophy change.
Yeah.
Which, when you look at it, who knows? I mean,
if the draft's in JSN, maybe they do have a philosophy change.
Because with Ryan Tannehill aging, Derrick Henry aging,
supposedly on the trade block, this could be a thing where, if that changes, I think, we have to have a quarterback change, which there's a bunch of rumors that Trey Lance is going to be going there. So, I mean, if that were to happen, Derrick Henry moves on. They're not as run heavy. They're a little different systematically. I think there's some silver linings here. I think if anything, this would be nice for rookie drafts, because I'm still drafting JSN. Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, I can't not. I think you definitely have to temper possibly year 1 and 2 expectations, which sucks, because I think JSN is a massive talent at the wide receiver position in this class, and in Dynasty and fantasy in general. Would not love this spot though at all. Even with him being, in my opinion, the wide receiver 1 in this case on the team, it'd be a tough pill to swallow, to say the least. Let's move on. We have another quarterback, the last quarterback in the first round coming off the board, I believe. So the New England Patriots are taking a quarterback at pick 14. Very interesting. They're taking Anthony Richardson, which this is the most odd pick for me in this entire draft. What are your thoughts here? What are you thinking with impact when it comes to this pick?
It sounds like maybe the Patriots aren't happy with Mac Jones. Maybe Bill Belichick's not happy with Mac Jones. And I don't know how to read into all that. It seems like a bunch of she said, he said. But if Anthony Richardson's going there, in this scenario, Lance Zierlien saying that Jones is moving on and that they're going to be trading him for a draft pick, and Anthony Richardson is the guy. Is Anthony Richardson starting year 1 for the Patriots? Because that's a different scenario than Anthony Richardson sitting for a year behind Mac Jones or a different veteran quarterback they might go out and acquire. And that's really what it's going to come down to for Anthony Richardson for me. If he's starting right away, I don't like that long term, to be honest. I think that's going to stun his development. I think he needs to sit for a while. He's got the physical upside to get you fantasy points day 1 if he's starting and getting opportunities to run the ball, just because of how, having that rushing ability as a quarterback just raises your floor up so much. Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead. No. I just had a moment of clarity. So I thought about this and think back to who the quarterback was for the Patriots before Mac Jones.
I mean, that's the same thought I had. I mean, they went after Cam Newton, and that is the easiest Anthony Richardson comp. So there are some things that make sense here. I can see where we've stretched it to Anthony Richardson to the Patriots. They did go after Cam Newton. They liked that offense. They made it work for a little bit too. If that's the offense we're looking at, that might not be too bad for Richardson's development, because they were very limited in that offense. It was very much run heavy with the quarterback, a lot of design runs, short yardage situations. Anthony Richardson would do well in that, and maybe that would allow him to have time to develop. It's a very interesting spot, that's for sure. But also, I worry about the weapons for Anthony Richardson to throw to on the Patriots.
Yeah. It's an interesting spot. It's one of the ones that leaves the weirdest taste in my mouth when I try to digest it. I do think, having that Cam Newton offense that we saw do well for a little bit, but when teams were like, okay, we stop the run, we stop the game, we win the game, basically, That was kind of the, and I like to believe that Cam Newton's arm is not what it used to be. And I think we can all agree on that. So I think bringing in somebody with a live arm day one that can do what Cam was doing so effectively, maybe there is something there. I don't know. I think a lot of this Mac Jones stuff is just kind of hooey, but there's almost too much of it to ignore.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's one thing. It's like consistent articles and things like that. And I mean, when it's a news story, media is just going to take it for a ride, and that's just how it goes. Definitely one of the most interesting landing spots in this draft, back to back with him and JSN. I think are both pretty interesting and odd spots. You're going to be very in or out, I think, on those two spots. But one spot that I'm going to be very in on as a fan and as a fan of the player, my Green Bay Packers at pick 15 help out Jordan Love, and they draft Dalton Kincaid, my tight end one in this class.
Oh, yeah.
I'd lose my mind if I'm going to be at your house for the draft, and if they draft either JSN, Josh Downs, or Dalton Kincaid, I'm going to freaking cry like a big old baby because I'm going to be so pumped for these guys. I love these guys. I want to hear your thoughts on this pick. What do you think of this could be?
I think if Dalton Kincaid goes to the Green Bay Packers, he's instantly a top 12 tight end. I think he is no matter where he goes because he's going to get first round draft capital. He's going to be a part of an offense. But you look at the Green Bay Packers offense, Dalton Kincaid would be the starting slot receiver. There's a lot of volume to be had as the starting slot receiver, especially when a guy like Christian Watson, as good as he is, he's not expected to necessarily be a high target guy. So if Dalton Kincaid takes on that role as the high target guy, he becomes the number one guy in this offense. I mean, it's scary to go around and start comparing people to Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, those are guys that are the number one target in their offense. I think in this situation, Dalton Kincaid is the number one target in his offense. Now, as a tight end, getting to the NFL, we do see them usually take a little bit of time to transition and get fully implemented into the offense. But a guy like Dalton Kincaid, he seems so pro-ready, especially for a team like the Packers. I feel like this is a great fit. I think we would see pretty great production by midseason.
I love this fit as a fan of Dalton Kincaid and the Green Bay Packers. Like we've touched on a lot this offseason with tight ends, to have one that really moves the needle, you need to be featured in an offense. You need to not just be a red zone target, a guy that, gets 2 catches a game. Yay, 1 is a touchdown. You need to be a guy that gets a lot of work, and Dalton Kincaid would, because I think he is a guy who's a target hog, where Christian Watson isn't necessarily, and Romeo Doubs isn't there yet. I think that's just not really his style either. I just don't think that's his thing. I think he'd be the third option in this offense if they don't add anybody else. But Dalton Kincaid here would be so exciting. I easily my tight end 1. I don't need to look at the rest of the board. I know who's there. I'd just be over the moon with this pick, and so shocked that Green Bay did not take a tackle or a defensive player at pick 15. Right. I think they actually probably will. I think they look to address the offensive positions day 2 more than likely. Moving on from hopes and dreams being crushed, let's talk about another tight end who got drafted to the Detroit Lions. We're trying this again. We're doing a do-over from TJ Hawkinson. We're drafting Michael Mayer now.
Great replacement.
Right, exactly. To the Detroit Lions. How do you feel about this one? Because this is, do we feel the same about it as we did when TJ Hawkinson went here just a few picks later?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think this is a great 1-for-1 replacement. I think Mayer has that potential to put up similar numbers to TJ Hawkinson. You kind of know exactly what kind of role he's going into. Jared Goff, we talked about, how he's a pretty good quarterback and can distribute the ball well. I mean, Mayer can walk into that offense, see 5-6 targets a game.
Pretty easily, he slots in, day 1 tight end. They have Brock Wright and they have James Mitchell.
Yeah, no competition.
No realistic competition there. I think, with this draft capital, the experience he already has where he can, be eased into the offense as a target, but he'll still be out there as a run blocker and a pass blocker and things like that. He's a do-it-all tight end.
That's exactly what Dan Campbell wants.
This is a great fit in an offense where he could be when it comes to targets, I think he could be the 2 in this offense. I think he slots in behind Amon-Ra, possibly above JMO. Depends on, I'm very...
Depends on his usage.
I'm very, maybe not year 1, but I think over time, we see a surpassing of JMO just because I just don't know that that's his game, that he's going to be a guy who gets more than 6-7 targets a game, maybe. Michael Mayer is somebody who I think can draw 8 to 10 pretty easily, and right there along with close to Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe not as many, but
Mhm.
I like this fit. I like this pick a lot. I think should be really excited about Michael Mayer in about 3 or 4 years. When after he's traded to some other team and they utilize him as a feature piece. This is going to be a pick that does some things to some people.
Yeah.
The Los Angeles Chargers select a wide receiver. They go with Jalin Hyatt at pick 21. Nate, I want to hear your thoughts because I have so many things to say.
So
go ahead.
Lance Zierlien's talked before about Jalin Hyatt, and
yes.
he's had Jalin Hyatt as his wide receiver 1.
Yes. Yep.
He's aware of the limitations of Jalin Hyatt, but he says that Jalin Hyatt just does that one thing so well to get down the field, create separation, and open up the defense. He does it so well. The NFL teams are going to value that. And this is where we need to understand the difference of NFL and fantasy football. Jalin Hyatt, incredible deep threat, incredible field stretcher. Him on the Chargers offense, I think, would be such a great piece to add to that offense. They've been using Jalen Guyton as their field stretcher for so long now. Jalin Hyatt is an immediate upgrade. He would be starting on those 3 wide that they play out of most of the time. Keenan Allen in the slot, Mike Williams at the X. This guy's playing the Z. And you're going to have weeks where Jalin Hyatt will have 30-plus points because Herbert's going to hit him for 2 touchdowns, down the field. But also you're going to have games where Keenan Allen's got his 12 targets, Mike Williams has his 8, Jalin Hyatt has his 3, but he helped the other guys open up the middle of the field. And that's what you got to understand at this point, especially if he goes this place. Yeah, it sounds great, but Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are taking targets before Jalin Hyatt. So at best, he's wide receiver 3 on the team. And with his role, I would expect it to be pretty inconsistent week to week.
I think you nailed that. And everybody wants him to add tight end too.
Yep.
So if they add a relevant tight end day 2, they didn't hear. They add a relevant tight end day 2, then where does Jalin Hyatt?
I think the 4th in targets.
Exactly. I think this would be a spot that, for me, I'm not really that interested in Jalin Hyatt in rookie drafts, period. But this would be a spot that would be, this is somebody I'm letting somebody else draft to eat a draft slot, to push somebody else down the board. Because Los Angeles Chargers, everybody wants a wide receiver on the Los Angeles Chargers. One goes there. They might not understand what Jalin Hyatt is. They expect a lot more out of him. They don't get it. They get something far less.
And we're not even talking about all the targets that Eckler, if he's there, would take up, or whoever they replace Eckler with. They're obviously going to throw the ball out of the backfield as well.
I think the thing, and we've touched on this in previous videos, is that with Hyatt, if the team drafts Hyatt, I think you need to be that much more excited about the other pieces on the team.
Yep.
Because Hyatt is going to create more opportunities and things underneath, because he's going to pull, defenses back to, we got to respect this guy or he's going to burn us, because he is that good at that one thing, like you said.
Yep.
More interesting pieces possibly for you as a Ravens fan. Your Ravens are back at it again. They are adding a weapon for CJ Stroud. They draft Zay Flowers here at pick 22. Is this wide receiver wasteland continuing, or does this change things with the CJ Stroud ad and Zay Flowers? What do you feel about this pick?
Yeah, Zay Flowers going to the Ravens would be very interesting. Whether it's Lamar Jackson or CJ Stroud, if they're drafting another wide receiver, I like Rashad Bateman. I liked him a lot coming out of college before he was even a Raven. I think he was my wide receiver 3 in that draft class. Really liked his talent. Unfortunately, hasn't really had a chance to show it off due to injury over the past 2 years. I don't know if Zay Flowers is better than Rashad Bateman. I think Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman are pretty equal talent-wise. They bring a couple different things to the game. Flowers brings more yards after the catch, but I think Bateman brings more contested catch ability and physicality to the game. So it'd be very interesting to see how the Ravens would use these guys in addition to Mark Andrews. I think it would be an exciting offense for sure, and both these guys can take targets. I think they would be viable options for CJ Stroud, with Mark Andrews being the wide receiver 1 kind of in this offense. I think Bateman and Zay Flowers could thrive as those second and third options. And, with how the Ravens can get creative with this new offensive coordinator, Moncton out of Georgia, I would love to see this offense with CJ Stroud, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Dobbins out of the backfield. That's a lot of efficiency right there.
I'd be very interested in this pick. And I think the one thing that this does is there is that stigma that Baltimore Ravens wide receivers could push him down the board, make him a little bit more of a value, which we're all about here at the Dynasty Rewind. Don't hate players, don't hate values.
I still think he would be in line for 100 targets.
I don't think that's outlandish to say.
Yeah. I mean, even on the Ravens, they're not going to be as run heavy now that Greg Roman's moved on. And especially if they have CJ Stroud, distributing the ball, I think 100 targets would be a great projection, pretty easy projection for Zay Flowers, if not more. I think you could split it up relatively even between Flowers, Bateman, and Andrews.
Moving on, finally, I'm sure everybody's been waiting for this pick if they haven't seen the mock draft yet. But the belle of the ball comes off the board. Bijan Robinson to the belle of the Buffalo Bills ball, I guess. Bijan Robinson to the Bills. I don't know how to feel about this. I love Bijan Robinson, and I think people are going to be over the moon about this landing spot, but I want to know your thoughts.
It's almost like the Eagles landing spot, but a little bit worse, because with the Eagles and the Bills, you're going to have a running quarterback who's going to check down less. You're going to have a running quarterback that's going to steal goal line touches. And both those things are not great for fantasy football for Bijan. I do think both of those quarterbacks would help out his efficiency, though. He's going to have a higher yards per carry. He's going to have probably just more touchdowns because he's on a good offense, but you do deal with, just less volume overall. So I think fantasy points wise, you're still getting a really good player. I don't think this devalues him outside, to not be the 101 anymore, but it does limit his overall fantasy potential, because ideally you want to see Bijan Robinson, if you're just looking at fantasy football terms, you want to see him be CMC. You want to see him be Derrick Henry, where a team's building around him, not where he's a complementary piece to Josh Allen. I'd still be happy with it. I still think Bijan's great, but this is one of the less ideal landing spots probably for Bijan.
I agree. I think this is just I think the Bills really need to add a piece, I think, to help with help Josh Allen in general. And I think it's a great piece to add. Like you said, I think it's one of those where I think it's going to, at the end of the day, a lot of these landing spots will play with the value of players. And I think what it's going to do is it's going to make Bijan perceive value that much more, because the Bills, great offense, all of these things. And that's not true, but there's some mouths to feed in that offense. And it's, each offense can only put out so many points.
And they're pass heavy.
And they're pass heavy team. And maybe that's because they haven't had this running back. In all honesty, I'm done with the Bills running back carousel. This would end it. So, what that means for James Cook, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, I think this would be a solid pick, and I think it's one that, again, would hit people differently. But I think when you really take it in, I don't think there's anything to panic about. I don't think there's anything where this makes you be like, oh, Bijan was my dynasty RB2 before. Now he's my RB1. Like, wherever you had him before is probably where you should still have him at the end of the day. Moving on from that pick, pretty solid pick there. We are going to get into the Dallas Cowboys doing Dallas Cowboy things and drafting one of the most exciting players in the draft. I actually really like this fit.
Me too.
Personally. The Dallas Cowboys take Quentin Johnston, the first big-bodied wide receiver we've had come off the board. What are your thoughts on this pick? We've both obviously acknowledged that we like it. Why do you like it so much?
I think Quentin Johnston really fills a hole in the Cowboys offense that they have. They don't have an X receiver. They tried Noah Brown out there. He had his games, but they need someone to work with CeeDee Lamb. And they got Brandon Cooks, who I think is a great guy to insert into that offense, but they still need that down the field bigger guy to take up the physical corner, to let CeeDee Lamb work across the middle. And Quentin Johnston fits that. And in this position, he's not the wide receiver one for the team from day one. He's a guy that, probably from day one would be the wide receiver 3 behind Brandon Cooks. Just because, think about it, rookie coming into the NFL, he's not going to surpass Brandon Cooks, who's a very talented wide receiver they just traded for. So he's a wide receiver 3 to start. And I think that's what he needs. He's a little bit of a raw prospect. He needs some time to develop and be more comfortable with his hands, be a bit better of a route runner, and understand, his role in that offense. I think this would be a place where he wouldn't have too much expected of him right away, and he could grow and eventually be that wide receiver 2 when they move on from Brandon Cooks, or, he surpasses him maybe by the end of his rookie season into his sophomore year.
There's a lot of wide receivers in this class that need to be little brothers. To better and bigger wide receivers. Oddly enough, Quentin Johnston needs to be the bigger little brother to CeeDee Lamb in this case. I think this is an awesome spot. I think being in an offense that he doesn't have to be the guy is probably the best case for him. I think it opens up for him. I think he opens up for CeeDee. I think it's an awesome pairing of the two.
You got Dak throwing the ball.
You got a decent enough offense. I know McCarthy's mouthing off that he wants to run the ball more. I still think this is a reasonably enough pass heavy offense at the end of the day. Watch out for Dallas to draft a running back day 2 for sure. I would be a big fan of this spot. This is one of the spots that I'm pretty in on with Quentin Johnston because I do think he needs to be that second guy. And I think he'd be, I think he's still the second in the rotation eventually long term. Brandon Cooks, maybe season 1, if he's healthy and everything, I think, yeah, like you said, he's probably the 3 possibly. But I'm interested to see because he just brings something different to that offense. So
yeah,
I'd be very interested in him at that point. I think there's a great fit. One of my favorite fits probably in this first round in general of a player who I think kind of needs a good fit. I like this one a lot. Speaking of fits, I don't like as much, and I don't think anybody should. We have a tight end going to a team that has been calling for a tight end, or people have been calling for a tight end to be drafted to for forever. The Cincinnati Bengals draft Luke Musgrave. Now, I know you're a huge Luke Musgrave fan. Your favorite player in the draft, probably. I know not that much, but I know you're big on Luke Musgrave. How do you feel about this landing spot? What do you think about it?
It's a good landing spot overall. You tie a tight end like Luke Musgrave, who's got great athletic ability and a great frame, to a great offense. I mean, you can't go wrong there. The problem is the volume. We talked about tight ends being the guy in their offense. That's how you get that fantasy football success. I like the upside of Luke Musgrave in this situation on a weekly basis. He can put up a lot of points, have a really big game for you. But there's just a lot of mouths to feed. It's a very pass-heavy offense, but there's still a lot of mouths to feed. I don't know if he would come in and steal Tyler Boyd's targets very quickly. So if he's just getting Hayden Hurst's targets, we do have some big games from that. But on a week-to-week basis, he's probably sitting just outside the top 12 wide receivers, if he gets this landing spot. But with that kind of offense and being tied to Joe Burrow, long-term viability is definitely there. That potential, if he can become the number 3 target in that offense, that is going to be worth quite a bit in the fantasy football landscape. So if Tyler Boyd moves on, or he just becomes where he is the number 3 target in that offense, if they move him from Joe Mixon, maybe they don't pass the ball a lot out of the backfield moving forward. I think there's upside here, but just like the Bills with Bijan Robinson, it's just a bit limiting because he's not going to be the guy in the offense.
I have a bit of a production comp for what I think Luke Musgrave becomes in this offense in the tight end landscape. I think he ends up being Dawson Knox as a production comp.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is like Dawson Knox has had his runs where he's been very viable and had his successes. And, he's always finished respectably among tight ends. But the thing is there's Jamar Chase, there's T. Higgins, there's Tyler Boyd still kicking around. There's whoever they get in the running back position taking some work, hopefully, probably, ideally at some point. I know that's never necessarily been Joe Mixon's calling card, but I feel like the issue with me for Musgrave is always going to be that if he goes here, he's going to be drafted ahead of Michael Mayer in leagues. But at the end of the day, I'm worried that he ever gets the production that meets the value he's going for. If he were to get this landing spot, I think people need to be really cautious and mindful of the fact that, hey, he's just not going to be the guy in that offense. It's just, even if he's the third option, tight ends that are the third option in offenses, I'd be concerned with where the value matches up with him. I like Luke Musgrave.
Very fair.
But I'd be concerned on where the value matches the production. And that's, again, don't hate players, hate values, and all of that fun stuff. So we have our last pick. Nate, if I told you heading into the draft years ago, whatever, that the Kansas City Chiefs would be drafting a wide receiver at pick 31, Kansas City Chiefs need a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Would you ever think I'd be telling you that the pick they made was Cedric Tillman?
I would not.
In the first round, no less.
Woo.
What are your thoughts on this pick?
I think that is a reach. I have Cedric Tillman graded out to be a third-round wide receiver. I think he's a solid day 2 pick. I think he's a guy that has potential as a bigger body receiver in this class. But in the first round, I don't think he's a first-round wide receiver, to be quite honest. I don't think he has that ability to take over the game, be a guy you scheme around, build your offense around. That's what I expect with a first-round wide receiver. I don't think Cedric Tillman really gives us that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see his full final season. He dealt with injury, but he played really well against Georgia and Alabama in 2021. Zierlien has noted here 17 catches for 352 yards and 2 touchdowns in games against those top teams. So we've seen him produce at a high level, but inconsistent, didn't really do much to start his career, just had a really big breakout year last year and then struggled with injuries this past year. too many question marks for me to be picking him up at the end of the first round. And if he ends up in this spot, sure, the potential is high, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be drafted a lot sooner than I'm willing to draft him because of the landing spot.
And again, this goes back to the Musgrave discussion, where I realistically believe, and I think, if this were to happen, you have to kind of
course,
adjust a little bit to what you expect out of him. But even then, I don't believe in him enough as a prospect to really be in at where he's going to be drafted in leagues. Because I think any wide receiver gets drafted to the Chiefs, day 2, probably a late first round pick in rookie draft, dynasty rookie drafts. Early second is probably the latest you're going to be able to get him. And I just think that at that point, on a prospect that I don't love, even making some adjustment for like, okay, this guy gives some benefit of the doubt to him that, hey, he's a first round pick. They're going to try to use him. I think hopefully that's usually the dream. I would have a really tough time matching what I believe in as a prospect plus production expected versus where he's going to be going in drafts. But for some fun, Nate, why not we go ahead and do this mock, just mocking these players that were drafted in this first round. I'm going to let you go first. Strategically, I'm going to let you go first so I get most of the players I want. Go ahead, Nate. Who do you have with your 101 in this fictitious draft?
I'm still picking up Bijan. He is the most valuable player in the draft, positional value-wise. I think we have to look at all the quarterbacks in this draft and limit expectations year 1. So I think Bijan Robinson, maybe not the best landing spot, but hey, you get to a good offense, you let the rest take care of itself.
Wherever you had him before, after this landing spot, and probably any landing spot, it should not change much. I just don't buy into that. But at my 102, I'm going to go ahead and take your Ravens, CJ Stroud. I love this landing spot quite a bit. I think they're building a good offense around him, and hopefully a good system is coming too. If this were to happen, I think this is probably my favorite quarterback landing spot. Nate, who you got at 103?
At the 103, I'm taking Bryce Young, my other top quarterback. I know, like I said, expectations year 1 should be limited, but they got a great coaching staff over there. I'm happy with Frank Reich's new quarterback. I think there's potential there. They'll build around him. Bryce Young is a guy I've seen win games, put the team on his back. Don't have too many worries about him. Not worried about the size. I'm happy with taking him at the 103.
I am far too predictable. I am going to take JSN at the 104 to the Titans. Don't love the landing spot, but I'm going to bank on the talent at the end of the day and possibly a philosophy change. If they're making this pick, instead of like a Bijan, I have to imagine the philosophy change is coming. If they were to draft Bijan here, I think it stays true, but that's a different conversation. So I'll take JSN here and be happy with taking my very high-end, highly graded wide receiver 1 in this draft class. Nate, kicking it back to you for that 105.
Yeah, for the 105, I'm, with Gibbs not being in the first round, we're not going to be drafting him. And surprisingly, Jordan Addison didn't make it into the first round here. I'm a little surprised by that. I expect him to be a first rounder. I'm going back to the quarterback position, and I'm actually going to pick up Anthony Richardson here at the 105. I like his landing spot better. I know in this situation, it does look like he's going to be starting right away, so I will take the swing on the upside. I like the Patriots to figure out an offense and get Anthony Richardson some fantasy points sooner than Will Levis on the Texans.
Love that pick. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick to not quarterback because I was going to go quarterback, but I want Dalton Kincaid, who went to my Green Bay Packers. I know we're drafting tight ends over wide receivers and things, but this is like a dream fit. In all honesty, it is. I think this is a tight end who becomes the next guy we're talking about in top 6 conversations, and eventually someday possibly more. I'm big in on this pick. I know it's probably a reach in most scenarios, but I have a very, very, very high grade on Kincaid. I think he's actually my second or third highest graded prospect in this class, which is just kind of outlandish. It is what it is. That's where I got him. So I'm taking him here at the 106 at the end of the day with a beautiful landing spot to my Green Bay Packers.
At the 107, not the pick I really want to make, but I think the pick I have to make based on value. I'm going to pick up Will Levis here.
Sucker.
I know it's a bit of a sucker. It's not. I would probably try to trade out if I could. I'd love to pick him up a little bit later, but I can't, in good conscience pick one of these wide receivers up. I don't think any of them are in the perfect situation left on the board. So I'm going to go with Will Levis, take the upside that he has. He's got a great arm. He's got the body. It's just in between the ears. Can he figure it out?
I am going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to the wide receiver well. I'm going to take Zay Flowers here, who also went to the Ravens. I'm going to bank on the fact that this new offense is more suitable for wide receivers, especially that CJ Stroud is there. That's going to help the wide receivers out too. Not saying Lamar Jackson is bad for it, but he is bad for it in terms of he takes rushing off, or adds rushing to the table to take away from the pass game and things like that. So I'm definitely going to take Zay Flowers here. Sorry, Nate, I took both your Ravens and my Packer. I just did it. But back to you with your 109.
Yeah, with the 109, I'm going to pick up Quentin Johnston here, going to the Cowboys. Once again, another guy with upside. A little maybe slow start to his rookie season because he'll have some veterans in front of him, but a guy I think would have a good situation here to grow and develop. And I'll take my chances with Quentin Johnston, his upside. I'm
going to go back to tight end. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take Michael Mayer. That went to Detroit. Another piece I believe is featured or can be featured in an NFL offense. Obviously going to be a little behind in terms of the overall target share because of Amon-Ra St. Brown. A big fan of this pick here. Another guy that top tier tight end. You should feel the same about him that you did about TJ Hockenson at the end of the day. Probably a little less athletic, but probably offers a little bit more as a just plain receiver and plain, overall tight end that's going to get on the field and do some solid work for you. So who you got with your next pick?
This next pick's kind of hard. We're down to 3 players left on the board, and I'm not going to go after the tight end here. I'm stuck between Cedric Tillman and Jalin Hyatt, actually. I have the players pretty graded out to somewhat similar tape grades. I love Jalin Hyatt in this role, but I think, he's better for the NFL than fantasy. I guess I'm going to take a swing on Cedric Tillman just because Patrick Mahomes is throwing to him. And there's more open competition than there is over at the Chargers for Jalin Hyatt, where he's going to be a little more pigeonholed into that wide receiver 3 spot. So I'll take my swing on Cedric Tillman. I think he's a good outside wide receiver. I don't know if he can develop into the one for the Chiefs, but he wouldn't have to be the one for the Chiefs right away. We know Travis Kelce's the one over there. So
the best part about all that divulsion you just did picking between those 2 wide receivers is I'm going to pick the tight end. I'm going to go with Luke Musgrave at the 112 here, and actually probably look to flip him because I don't necessarily believe in the value for him with where he's going to want to be drafted and the production label that people are going to put on him and associate with his value. So I'm going to take Musgrave here, call it a day with my draft, and leave you with Jalin Hyatt.
I'm picking up Jalin Hyatt. I'm a little worried about the week in and week out floor of Jalin Hyatt, but in best ball leagues, I would be happy to pick him up in the second round if he had this landing spot. Even if it's not best ball, I'm still happy picking up Jalin Hyatt in the second round for value because he is tied to Justin Herbert and 2 wide receivers that get injured more than half the games usually. Yeah. So there's going to be opportunity there for Jalin Hyatt at some point. I do have question marks if he could take on that big of a role for a team. He would have an opportunity, I'm sure.
For sure, especially drafted at that capital, you have to imagine. But that is going to be it for this one. This was something a little different. If y'all enjoyed, I do hope you let us know down below if you'd like to see more things like this. Instead of always just doing rookie mock drafts, on Sleeper, etc. This kind of just gives a different vibe and a different bit of a reactionary scenario. So if you guys enjoyed it, leave a like, comment down below. Let us know what you thought of these landing spots as well. If you checked out this mock, if you haven't, I'll link it down in the description box below so you can check it out as well if you haven't. It is insanity. So with some of these spots, but I think some of these are fairly reasonable. I think some are a little outlandish, with moving Lamar Jackson and things like that. But it is what it is at the end of the day. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, like I said, leave that like, comment down below. Let us know how much you love this video and love this channel. It makes us feel good. Be nice down there. Appreciate the hell out of all you guys. That's going to be it though for us. Me and Nate. Appreciate you chiming in with these along with me. But at the end of the day, that's going to be it for this one. We'll see y'all in the next one. And until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.